He bought his mother-in-law a $500,000 home and sent me a $5 cake on my 66th birthday. No call, just a text. I'm busy. My name is Evelyn Parker. I raised my son alone after his father passed. I worked 3 jobs, skipped meals, prayed through tears, all so Garrett could wear shoes without holes and dream bigger than I ever could. I never asked for thanks. But this was erasure. Forgotten like an old receipt. But here's what he didn't know. A mother's silence doesn't mean surrender. Hidden in the walls of my old house was a secret his father left behind. Something he never expected, and I never planned to use. But now? Oh, now. I remember everything. The smell of gumbo, the swing creaking at sunset, and the sound of justice, knocking louder than betrayal. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about remembering your worth, even when your own blood forgets it. Evelyn Parker sat quietly on the porch of her small shotgun house in New Orleans, her fingers curled around a chipped ceramic mug. The porch swing creaked with a rhythm that had become background music to her mornings. Around her, the scent of magnolia and jasmine mingled with the rich aroma of chicory coffee. The street was still, bathed in the gold of early sunlight, and her garden, though modest, bloomed with tomatoes, basil, and a few stubborn marigolds that had survived the last storm. This house, weathered and worn, held the echoes of every heartbeat her family had ever had. It was more than wood and nails. It was the home she and Walter had built, brick by brick, laugh by laugh, fight by makeup kiss. Walter had laid the floorboards himself, always muttering that no contractor could put in a floor with soul. And Evelyn? She chose the yellow paint for the kitchen walls, saying it would trap sunshine even on the cloudiest days. That was decades ago, before time started peeling the paint and the world pulled Walter away. When Walter died of a heart attack, it had been sudden, brutal in its speed and finality. One moment they were dancing in the living room to an old Etta James record. The next she was clutching his hand in a hospital room, whispering prayers that never found answers. Garrett was only 12 then, skinny as a broomstick and twice as restless. Evelyn buried her grief in work, cleaning houses, scrubbing motel bathrooms, taking in sewing. She burned her fingers pressing suits she could never afford and cooked gumbo with whatever she could stretch into a meal, all to make sure Garrett had lunch money, books for school, and a pair of shoes that didn't squeak when he walked. And Garrett, oh, he was her pride. As a child, he was affectionate to the point of clinginess, always hugging her waist, always drawing pictures of their future house. A big white one with pillars, like the ones in the Garden District. "When I grow up, Mama," he'd said with pure conviction at age 10, "I'm gonna buy you the biggest house in all of Louisiana. You won't have to clean anything ever again." She'd smiled, tousled his hair, and told him that his dreams were her dreams. That memory still glowed like an ember in her chest, though it had grown dimmer each year. The Evelyn of now was different. She was still kind-eyed, but the corners of her mouth held a quiet ache. Her hands, once nimble with thread and cloth, now bore the stiffness of arthritis. She still kept Walter's picture on the mantel, framed in a worn brass oval, slightly tilted no matter how often she straightened it. Every morning she said good morning to that photo. Every evening she told it good night. This morning, though, her words to Walter came heavy and slow. "Well, baby," she whispered, staring into his grainy smile. "It's almost my birthday again, 66. Can you believe it?" The photo, of course, said nothing, but in her mind, he chuckled. She imagined him teasing. "You don't look a day over 39, darling." She sat back down and opened her worn journal, pages full of grocery lists, thoughts she couldn't speak aloud, and dates of importance long past. She wrote, July 18th, 66 years old tomorrow. Wonder if Garrett will call. Garrett, the son who used to cry when she left for work, the boy who made her macaroni necklaces and told her she was the bestest mom in the universe. Somewhere between that sweet boy and the man in the tailored suits he became, the warmth had faded. They still spoke, occasionally. A rushed birthday text last year, a Christmas card with his wife's name printed first, his scribbled signature barely legible. She hadn't seen him in person in almost 6 months. They lived only 20 minutes apart. She didn't understand it. Or perhaps she did, but the answer was a knot she refused to pull. Life had made Garrett important, busy, full of meetings, investors, flights to New York. She told herself she was proud, told her friends at church he was doing big things. But when she sat alone on her porch as night fell, she felt something else entirely. Not bitterness, not anger, just a hollow echo. The front door creaked open behind her, and the old floorboards groaned. She imagined Walter's footfall there for a brief second, still catching herself expecting him in old habits. She stood slowly, knees aching, and went inside. The house was dim but familiar. She traced her fingers along the wood-paneled wall, pausing where Garrett had once scratched a dragon into it with a fork. He'd been 8. She'd grounded him for a week, but never sanded the dragon out. She passed the mirror in the hallway, caught her own reflection, gray hair and soft curls, a face mapped with lines from laughter, sun, and worry. A strong face, a mother's face. Back in the kitchen, she placed her cup in the sink and sighed. The silence settled again, deep and unmoving. A breeze pushed through the cracked window above the sink, rustling a postcard pinned to the sill. It was from Garrett, postmarked 2 years ago from Miami. Having a blast. Work retreat. Talk soon. He never did. She pressed her fingers to the photo of Walter one more time and whispered, "Did we raise him wrong? Or did the world teach him something we couldn't?" There was no answer, only the creak of the porch swing moving in the wind and the quiet hum of a house that remembered everything. That afternoon, while dusting the living room shelf, Evelyn found a glossy travel brochure tucked between a pair of recipe books she hadn't opened in years. It was from one of those senior travel clubs, the kind she usually tossed without reading. But today, for reasons she couldn't name, she sat down in her armchair and opened it carefully, as though unfolding something sacred. A paddleboat cruise along the Mississippi River. 4 nights, all meals included. Old jazz in the evenings. Tours of Civil War mansions and bayou towns. There was even a picture of a smiling woman in a wide-brimmed sun hat on the cover, her gray hair pulled back in a tidy bun. Evelyn's fingers brushed over the image. Something inside her stirred, an echo of something long buried, longing. She imagined herself on that riverboat, sipping tea on a private balcony, watching the muddy water roll past like time itself. The thought was intoxicating, a moment of escape, of movement, of mattering. She folded the brochure neatly and slipped it into the side drawer of the buffet beneath the mirror. Not thrown away, not quite saved, just held. For later, just in case. Later that evening, Evelyn sat on her bed with her old tablet glowing in the dim light. She opened Facebook, a ritual she didn't particularly enjoy but couldn't quite quit. Her feed was full of church ladies sharing cookie recipes and grandchildren photos. But then she saw it. A post from Monica, Garrett's wife, a smiling photo of Monica's mother, Estelle, standing in front of a pristine white house with palm trees and a manicured lawn. Caption, "A dream come true. Thank you, Garrett, for gifting Mom this $500K house in Naples. You're the best son a woman could ask for." Evelyn didn't breathe for a full 10 seconds. Not because of the price tag, not even the location. It was the word. "Son?" She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying herself. The air around her thickened. Her pulse thudded in her ears like distant drums. Her thumb hovered over the like button, but she couldn't bring herself to press it. Instead, she locked the screen, setting the tablet gently on the nightstand as if any sudden movement might shatter her completely. A few minutes passed before she opened her old flip phone. She stared at the contact that read simply, Garrett. With trembling fingers, she typed, "Just a little reminder. Your mama's birthday is tomorrow. Love you." She hit send and waited. The screen showed delivered. Then a moment later, read, and then nothing. She stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. No dots, no reply, not even a single word. The pain didn't come in a crash. It leaked in like water through a hairline crack. Slow, cold, certain. She lay down on her bed facing Walter's side, where the quilt was still smooth and untouched. She whispered into the dark. He read it, Walter, saw it, and just... She didn't finish. She cried silently, her tears soaking into the pillow without a sound. It wasn't the big things that hurt, not really. It was this, the absence, the casual disregard, the silence that shouted. By morning, she had composed herself. Her rituals saved her. Black coffee in a chipped mug, a few careful snips in the garden, a crossword from the Times-Picayune. The sun lit the edge of the kitchen counter just right. She moved like a dancer through muscle memory, her grief tucked neatly behind her eyes. But as she stirred the coffee, her hand trembled, and a single drop landed in the saucer below. She told herself it was nothing, just steam, just water. But she didn't wipe it away. She sat on the porch, staring at the tomato vines she'd trained up the lattice. A bee moved lazily from flower to flower. The morning was peaceful. The swing creaked. Her breath came in shallow sips, like a woman in a dress too tight around the ribs. Inside her, hope had withered into something smaller, still alive but barely. She told no one, not her friends from church, not Martha from the book club. She kept it tucked behind her smile, behind the slight nods when someone asked, "How's your boy doing?" "Busy," she always replied. "Important things. You know how it is." She lied with grace, with elegance, like a woman trained to carry shame the way others carry purses. Close, quiet, never drawing attention. And when the postman passed that day and gave her a friendly wave, she smiled and waved back, then turned away, afraid the tears in her eyes might catch the sunlight and give her away. Because Evelyn wasn't just a mother forgotten. She was a woman unraveling, quietly, thoroughly. And no one, not even Garrett, knew just how close she was to breaking. The morning of her 66th birthday arrived with a hush, as if even the wind tiptoed past her porch. Evelyn woke before sunrise, the stillness of the house a comfort and a curse. She moved with purpose, her bones stiff, but her spirit determined. She opened the closet and reached for the lavender dress she reserved for Easter Sunday. Simple, elegant, a little faded at the seams. She ironed it carefully, humming an old gospel tune as steam rose like ghostly breath from the iron's mouth. After dressing, she twisted her hair into a neat chignon, dabbing a touch of rose water behind her ears. In the mirror, she didn't see 66. She saw a woman who still had grace in her posture and love in her heart. In the kitchen, she laid out the good china. Delicate plates with hand-painted roses and gold-rimmed teacups that only saw daylight on holidays. She baked butter cookies, just like the ones Garrett used to sneak off the cooling rack when he was a boy. The scent of sugar, butter, and vanilla filled the air, weaving through the house like a memory she could almost touch. By 9 o'clock, the table was set. The living room sparkled. Even the garden seemed to stand straighter, its flowers lifting their heads toward the sun. Evelyn moved to the porch swing, hands folded in her lap, eyes watching the road. 10 o'clock passed, then 11. She didn't mind. At noon, she reheated her coffee and checked her phone. No messages, but that was okay. Maybe he was preparing a surprise. Maybe he'd show up with Monica and that flashy smile of his, holding a bouquet of flowers or, God forbid, a mariachi band like the one he sent to Monica's mother for her birthday last year. She laughed at the thought, shaking her head. She returned to the swing. 1 o'clock. The cookies remained untouched. The sun crept across the porch, bringing the heat with it. She dabbed her forehead and smoothed her dress. 2 o'clock. A breeze swept by, carrying with it the distant scent of barbecue from a neighbor's yard. Children laughed somewhere down the street. The world was spinning, just not around her. 3 o'clock. The doorbell rang. Her heart leapt. She stood too quickly, her knees protesting. She straightened her dress, pressed her lips together, and opened the door. It was a boy, 17 maybe, with a delivery shirt, earbuds in, and a bored expression. "You Evelyn Parker?" he mumbled. She nodded. He handed her a small cardboard box. "Happy birthday or whatever," he muttered before turning back to his idling car. Evelyn stood in the doorway, staring at the box in her hands. It was too light, too cold. The edges of the plastic container inside pressed against the cardboard. She walked back inside slowly, each step echoing in the silence. At the kitchen table, she opened the box. Inside was a small, round cake. The frosting was a garish swirl of yellow and blue, and the writing, sloppily piped in red, read, "Happy birthday." No name, no card. A price tag clung stubbornly to the side of the container. $500. Her flip phone buzzed. A new message. From Garrett. "I'm busy." 3 words, no punctuation, no emojis, no warmth. She stared at the screen, her thumb frozen above the keys. Then slowly, she set the phone down beside the cake. Her chest felt tight, not with anger, not even sadness, just weight. A pressure behind her ribs, like her heart had grown too big to fit inside her body. She picked up the cake, holding it in both hands as if it might break, or she might. The plastic container was damp with condensation. The cheap frosting had started to sweat under the kitchen light. A droplet of blue icing rolled down the side like a tear. Evelyn walked into the living room and stood before the mantel. Walter's picture smiled at her, forever caught in that young, hopeful gaze from their wedding day. She set the cake down gently in front of the frame. Then she reached for the box of matches and lit the candle beside it. The flame flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Her own face reflected dimly in the glass of Walter's photo. Older, lined, eyes shining not with joy but with something rawer, something quieter. She sat in her armchair and stared at the scene before her. The cake, the photo, the candlelight. This wasn't just a birthday. It was a reckoning. She had hoped. She had believed. She had waited. And in return, she got $5 of sugar and silence. Outside, the world carried on. But inside this house, a woman's heart had cracked. And no one, not even her son, had heard the sound. The sun had begun its descent, painting the sky in soft apricot and mauve, when Evelyn's phone rang again. It startled her. Still seated in the quiet living room, the cake untouched, the candle long since burned out. She reached for the flip phone with mechanical motion, her thumb trembling as she pressed the green button. "Evelyn." The voice on the other end was unmistakable. Bright, too cheerful, too composed. Whitney. "Hi, it's Whitney. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Garrett and I agreed it's really time. We're sending a van tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp. A couple of the guys from the estate company will help pack your things, and they'll drive you to the Riverview Care Center." Evelyn blinked. "Now don't worry," Whitney continued, her tone syrupy. "It's a lovely place. So clean, great staff, private rooms. Honestly, it's a lot safer for someone your age. I mean, that old house, so many stairs, and it's just not practical anymore. Plus, you'll make friends. Isn't that nice?" There was a pause. "Anyway, happy birthday. Garrett's been swamped, but he's thinking of you, really. See you soon." The call ended. Evelyn didn't move. She sat in her chair, her hands still folded over her lap, the phone lying face down on the side table. The room around her buzzed softly, with the distant chirping of cicadas and the hum of the refrigerator. The lavender dress, once crisp and hopeful, now clung to her like a memory too tight around the shoulders. A care center. They were moving her out, not asking, not discussing, declaring. She looked up, eyes scanning the walls, the ceiling, the worn curtains she had sewn herself. This was her home, her life. Every photo frame, every flower pot, every creaky floorboard held a story. And yet, to them, it was disposable. She rose, slowly, stiffly, and walked toward the bookshelf. Her fingers skimmed across spines of novels and old church cookbooks until they landed on a leather-bound journal. Walter's. She hadn't opened it in years, maybe decades. It was cracked with age, the corners curled, but his handwriting, firm, careful, still lived inside. She sank onto the couch, pulled the crocheted throw over her knees, and opened it near the middle. The scent of old paper and cologne wafted upward. April 3rd, 2002. Eve was asleep on the porch swing today. Lord, how I love that woman. "I don't have long, I can feel it. I just hope this house keeps her safe when I'm gone." Her throat tightened. She flipped ahead. May 10th, 2002. I finished sealing the box. It's behind the study wall above the shelf. Evelyn never goes up there. That's for the best. In it, I put everything she'll ever need, should she ever truly need it. If Garrett grows into the man I pray he'll be, it'll never be opened. But if he forgets who he is, if he forgets who she is, then maybe that box will help her remember who she's always been. Evelyn's breath caught. A box. In the wall. She stood, suddenly urgent, suddenly alive, and made her way to the small study down the hall, the one Walter had used to pay bills and write letters. She hadn't gone in there in years. Dust floated lazily in the last light of day as she entered. The air smelled like time. She approached the bookshelf and scanned it, her fingers grazing over dusty encyclopedias and tax folders. Then she noticed it, a wooden panel above the top shelf, slightly uneven at the corner, almost imperceptible. She pulled a step stool from the hallway and climbed carefully, knees creaking in protest. Her fingers found the edge of the panel, and with effort, she nudged it aside. Behind it was darkness, hollow space, and nestled deep within, a small iron strongbox. Her heart pounded. She reached in, pulled it free, and cradled it against her chest like an infant. Back in the living room, she set it on the coffee table, the candle beside it still smelling faintly of wax and burnt cotton. The box was locked, but she knew Walter, knew his ways. She went back to their bedroom, reached for the worn Bible on his nightstand, and flipped to Psalm 23. The key was there, tucked into the page like a bookmark of divine design. She returned, hands steady now, slid the key into the lock and turned. Click! The lid creaked open. Inside were papers, folders, a bundle of bank documents, an insurance policy, her name in bold, the numbers. She blinked, read again, sat down. She wasn't just the forgotten mother of a selfish man, she was the beneficiary of a legacy. One Walter had preserved, protected, hidden, so she'd never have to depend on anyone who didn't respect her. A tear rolled down her cheek. Not from grief this time, but from clarity. They thought she was finished, but Walter knew. And now, so did she. The house had never felt so alive. Evelyn moved through it with the restless energy of someone newly awakened, her lavender dress now traded for jeans and an old flannel shirt. Dust trailed behind her as she pulled books off the shelves in Walter's study, stacking them methodically on the floor. Each spine she touched carried a memory, each shift in weight another breath of their shared past. The bookshelf groaned under the sudden movement, but she kept going, heart pounding in her chest like it was trying to break free. She had reread Walter's journal entry a dozen times. Behind the study wall, above the shelf, her eyes scanned every edge of the wood until they landed on a small, rusted screw, barely visible in the top right corner. A second one mirrored it on the opposite side. Her hands, though trembling, moved with intent. She fetched a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer and returned. It wasn't easy. Decades of humidity had warped the panel slightly, but the screws finally gave way with a groan. Evelyn pressed her fingertips to the edge of the panel and tugged gently. It popped free with a dry sigh, revealing a narrow cavity hidden between the studs. Inside was a small iron chest. It was old and worn, covered in a film of dust that dulled its edges. She reached in, grunting slightly at the weight, and set it carefully on the study table. The metal was cold under her fingers. The lock was intact, but Walter's Bible, as she discovered earlier, had held the key. With a quiet prayer, she inserted the key again. Click. The lock gave. Evelyn lifted the lid. Inside lay neatly organized folders, yellowed slightly with age but protected by plastic sleeves. The top one bore the heading, Credential Insurance, Policyholder, Walter Parker. She turned the pages slowly. The first page made her breath hitch. Her name, bold and unmissable, Evelyn Parker, sole beneficiary. Her eyes dropped to the payout amount. 7 figures. 7. Her knees buckled slightly. She sat down hard on Walter's old wooden chair. She kept reading. Beneath the insurance documents were bank statements, all addressed to the Walter and Evelyn Parker Trust. Every month, since the year Walter passed, the same pattern, deposits, growing interest, but also, Evelyn's hands tightened around the paper, regular withdrawals, large ones. Her eyes traced the recipient fields, all routed through a familiar name, Garrett T. Parker. There was more. She found the original will, Walter's signature firm and unmistakable. Attached was a notarized letter designating Garrett as the trustee, with one clear stipulation. Funds to be used solely for the welfare, medical care, and quality of life of Evelyn Parker. Any other use is strictly prohibited and subject to legal action. Her chest tightened. She felt something building beneath her ribs, like pressure before a thunderstorm. She read more, flipping through the bundle of statements and notations. The withdrawals started just months after Walter's passing. They were regular, large, unquestioned. Garrett had taken the trust, her trust, and drained it slowly, deliberately. 15 years. He had built his company, bought his mansion, paid for Monica's business school, gifted her mother that lavish home in Florida, with Walter's money, with Evelyn's future. Her hand shook. It wasn't neglect. It wasn't emotional distance. It was theft. She stood abruptly, pushing back from the table. The room spun. The wallpaper, the books, the familiar creak of the floor. It all seemed to shift under the weight of this new truth. She staggered into the hallway and pressed her hand to the wall, steadying herself. How long had she lived under this lie? How many holidays had she spent alone while he smiled in photos, raising champagne glasses with Monica's family? How many times had she defended his absence, told herself he was just busy, when all along he was hiding behind a mask? Not just a distant son, a liar, a thief. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Instead, she turned back into the study. There was one more folder, thinner, clipped together with a paperclip. Legal correspondence. Evelyn read through it carefully. It was a confirmation of her legal standing as the beneficiary of the trust. A clause near the bottom made her pulse race. If mismanagement or misuse by the trustee is suspected, the beneficiary may seek restitution through civil or criminal proceedings. She didn't know law, but she knew betrayal. And Walter had left her more than money. He had left her a sword. And maybe, just maybe, she was strong enough to wield it. The discovery filled Evelyn with both clarity and fire. Yet as the night deepened and the windows turned to mirrors, her resolve ran into a hard wall of uncertainty. She had the documents, the proof. But what now? She couldn't navigate courts and banks and laws, not alone. She sat at the kitchen table, lit only by the yellow glow of the overhead bulb, and flipped open the flip phone. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number scribbled in the corner of Walter's old insurance policy, the contact for his attorney. It rang once, twice, then a beep. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. She tried again. Same result. Gone. She exhaled slowly, the air wheezing from her lungs like a balloon deflating. The strength she'd felt hours earlier began to slip from her grasp. She placed the phone down and stared at the rickety bookshelf on the far wall. Think, Evelyn. Walter had been meticulous. He'd always had backups. She walked into the living room, now dark except for the flickering of a streetlight through the window blinds. She opened the sideboard drawer, the one beneath the old linens. Inside lay a stack of dusty AARP magazines, and beneath them, a cracked leather-bound address book. She hadn't opened it since Walter's funeral. The cover creaked as she flipped it open, her finger trailing over each name. So many were gone, crossed out, relocated, or lost to time. Then she stopped. Jennings, Noah. There was a phone number in faded ink, and beneath it, a note in Walter's hand. Tulane Law. Brilliant kind. Give him a chance. Evelyn stared. She remembered Noah vaguely. Freckle-faced, polite, always carrying a heavy backpack when he came by to mow the lawn or help Walter fix the porch steps. Walter had mentored him, even helped him apply for scholarships. She hadn't seen or heard of him in over 20 years. Still, it was something. She picked up the phone again and dialed the number with care. It rang and rang. Just as she was about to hang up, a calm, professional voice answered, "Jennings Law, this is Noah." She froze. "Noah?" she said softly. "This is Evelyn Parker. I was Walter's wife." There was a beat of silence followed by a sudden warmth in his tone. "Mrs. Parker? Oh my God, it's been years. I still remember your sweet tea." She laughed lightly, surprised at the sound of it. "I didn't know if this number still worked," she said. "Still in the same place," he replied. "What can I do for you?" Her voice tightened. I need help. Walter left something behind, something I just found. It's about Garrett." Noah was quiet, but she could hear the gears turning. "Would you feel comfortable meeting in person?" he asked. "Yes," she said, not hesitating. "I can come wherever you are." "I'm by the river today, corner cafe across from the ferry dock. I'll be here for the next hour. I'll be there in 30 minutes. The cafe was a quiet, tucked-away spot with chipped paint and rattan chairs. A warm breeze blew from the Mississippi as paddle boats groaned somewhere in the distance. Evelyn stepped inside, clutching the iron box like a sacred relic. Noah stood when he saw her. He was older, of course, early 40s perhaps, but there was still that same earnestness in his eyes. He pulled out her chair, waited until she was seated, and then gave her a warm, respectful smile. "I never forgot you or Mr. Parker," he said. "He believed in me when no one else did. Paid for my textbooks, vouched for me at Tulane. I owe him everything." Tears pricked the corners of her eyes. "He trusted you," she said simply. Then she placed the box on the table and opened it. For the next half hour, Evelyn spoke with a voice that grew steadier with every sentence. She laid out the timeline, the betrayal, the trust documents, and the cold message of a $5 cake. Noah listened, intently, seriously. As she spoke, his posture changed. His brows furrowed. His lawyer's instincts sharpened. He flipped through the documents, occasionally nodding or making a soft sound of disbelief. When she finished, he closed the lid and looked up. "Mrs. Parker," he said, voice firm, "I'm not just any lawyer. I specialize in elder abuse, financial exploitation, and trust violations. I've handled cases like this before, but never this personal." She blinked. "You're not alone in this," he continued. "What your son did isn't just cruel, it's criminal. With these documents and the right moves, we can make this right. But I'll warn you, it won't be easy." She leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Nothing ever has been." He smiled. "Then we'll fight like hell." And in that moment, for the first time in years, Evelyn didn't feel like a forgotten woman in a crumbling house. She felt like a storm just waiting to break. Noah spread the documents across his office desk like a battlefield map, each page a mine of betrayal and deceit. Evelyn sat across from him, her back straight despite the heaviness in her chest. The dusty iron box rested beside her, no longer just a container of papers, but a vault of truth. "We need a strategy," Noah said, his tone clinical but laced with personal resolve. "We can't just show up in court waving this around. He'll spin it. He has resources, connections. We have to box him in, quietly." He began outlining the plan. Step 1, re-establish Evelyn's mental and financial independence. They needed to show she was of sound mind and capable of handling her affairs, contrary to what Garrett was likely planning to argue when trying to assume legal control over her estate. Step 2, compile hard proof of how the trust had been abused. Garrett may have cleaned up his tracks over the years, Noah said, but money always leaves a scent. We'll follow the paper trail. Step 3, gather present-day evidence of malicious intent. It wasn't enough to prove past misuse. They needed current, undeniable proof that Garrett still saw Evelyn as a burden and a bank account. Then came the twist in the plan. "You're going to have to act," Noah said. Evelyn tilted her head. "We need Garrett to believe you're the version of you he thinks you are. Frail, confused, unable to fight back. You play that role. Feed him that version. All the while, we build the case." Evelyn nodded slowly. You want me to be the mask while you become the sword. Noah smiled faintly. Exactly. Ina's. The next morning, Evelyn pulled out her most faded cardigan, wrapped a scarf loosely around her head, and let her shoulders sag. She didn't answer the doorbell immediately when Garrett dropped by unexpectedly. When she did, her voice was soft, her eyes unfocused. She called him by the wrong name, just once, just enough to plant the seed. He left smiling, exactly as planned. Behind the door, Evelyn stood straighter, her eyes sharpening. Phase 1 had begun. She visited the main branch of the city library downtown, tucked her scarf tighter around her neck, and slipped inside unnoticed. The young woman at the front desk smiled warmly. Need help with the computers today, ma'am? Evelyn nodded. I'd like to learn about, secure emails. The next few days became a secret education. Evelyn brought a spiral-bound notebook and took notes like a college freshman. Noah had given her a burner smartphone, preloaded with secure messaging apps and cloud storage access. She learned how to scan documents and send encrypted attachments, how to check public property records and business filings, how to trace names of shell companies linked to Garrett's firms. She didn't understand every word, but she understood enough. Each afternoon, she rode the St. Charles streetcar home, her notebook clutched to her chest, the city buzzing around her. She'd return to her little yellow house, pour herself a cup of chicory coffee, and type up her notes at the secondhand laptop Noah had loaned her. At night, she reviewed the trust statements Garrett had issued over the years. Statements that looked clean at first glance, but were riddled with quiet discrepancies. Withdrawals that didn't align with her expenses. Transfers to obscure funds she'd never approved. One by one, she logged them, photographed them, and uploaded them into the case file Noah was building like a fortress. Days passed, then weeks. Evelyn played her part flawlessly. She answered Garrett's calls with slow, meandering conversations, repeating herself just enough to keep him convinced. She mentioned how confusing bills had become, how the kitchen faucet kept leaking, how she was so tired lately. He offered again to take care of everything. She thanked him with practiced gratitude. What she didn't say, she had installed a voice recorder under the table. Every call, every visit, every manipulative phrase, documented. But it wasn't all Shadow's intention. Each new skill she mastered brought a sense of victory. She hadn't felt this alive, this vital, in decades. There were moments she stood in the mirror after a day's work at the library, her hands ink-stained and her cardigan smelling faintly of old books, and whispered to herself, I'm not done. The Evelyn Garrett had tried to erase? She was rewriting herself. One step, one email, one document at a time. She was no longer waiting for justice, she was becoming it. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when Evelyn baited the hook. She printed a forged document Noah had crafted, made to look like a dusty savings bond from the 1980s, labeled redeemable by authorized trustee only. Just technical enough to seem confusing, just vague enough to appear unimportant. She placed it in a manila envelope with a few other old papers and left it on the kitchen table, then called Garrett. Sweetheart, she said, letting her voice tremble just slightly, I found these old papers in the attic. I think they might be worth something, but I'm just not sure what to do. Garrett took the bait like a hungry shark. I'll be there tomorrow, Mom, he said quickly, his voice clipped with urgency. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone else. I'll handle it. She hung up, her face stone still. The trap was set. Noah had already made the arrangements. Across the street from Evelyn's home, a plain silver sedan with tinted windows pulled up just before noon. Inside, a licensed private investigator checked his equipment, long lens camera, parabolic mic, and a body cam. Noah sat in the back seat with headphones on, listening in. Evelyn, meanwhile, placed the envelope neatly on the table and boiled a fresh pot of coffee. She dressed in soft beige, no jewelry, no makeup, just a cardigan and a gentle smile. At precisely 1:37 p.m., Garrett's BMW pulled up. He didn't knock. He walked in like he owned the place. Where's the envelope? He asked, brushing past her without a hug. "Right here, baby," she said, pushing it toward him across the table. He tore it open, scanning the documents quickly. When he saw the fake bond, his eyes widened. Greed flashed across his face like lightning. "This is valuable," he muttered. "Very valuable. We'll need to move fast. Don't talk to anyone about it, you hear me?" "I wouldn't even know who to call," Evelyn said, feigning confusion. Then Garrett pulled a folded packet from his briefcase. "Just sign this power of attorney form, Mom. It'll make everything easier. I can manage the details for you. Banks can be tricky with old documents like this." He slid the pen across the table. Evelyn stared at the page. General power of attorney, full rights to all current and future assets. She lifted her eyes to his, and for the first time in years, she didn't look away. Her gaze was clear, steady. It startled him. Still, she picked up the pen, hands visibly trembling, and signed her name. Slow, shaky, just like the old woman he thought she was. He smiled, smug, victorious. "Good," he said, snapping the papers shut. "You've done the right thing." He turned to leave and walked straight into Noah. The door had opened without a creak. The moment Garrett stepped back onto the porch, Noah appeared in front of him, holding up a laminated legal badge. "Garrett Parker," Noah said calmly. "My name is Noah Jennings. I represent Mrs. Evelyn Parker." Garrett blinked. "I'm sorry, who—" Before he could finish, Noah stepped aside and gestured across the street. The private investigator stepped out of the car, holding a high-powered camera in one hand and a boom mic in the other. "We have photographs, audio, and video of this afternoon's interaction," Noah continued, "including your attempt to coerce Mrs. Parker into signing over her estate under false pretenses." Garrett's face drained of color. "You tricked me," he whispered, disbelief turning to rage. Evelyn stepped forward then onto the porch, but she didn't cower. She didn't flinch. Her back was straight, her eyes bright, her voice firm. "No, Garrett," she said, her tone cool. "You tricked yourself." Garrett looked between his mother, the lawyer, and the camera pointed squarely at him. "I'll sue you," he hissed. "You ambushed me. You set me up." Noah didn't blink. Everything was conducted under legal parameters. You entered her home, you initiated the transfer. You coerced her, and you did it all on tape. Evelyn took a slow step forward, her feet deliberate. "I spent 15 years believing you were just too busy to call," she said, her voice low. "But this proves you weren't too busy. You were too greedy." Garrett opened his mouth. She raised a hand. He stopped. "I gave you everything," she said. "My youth, my health, my loyalty, and you gave me betrayal in return." Her eyes bored into his like twin blades of glass. "But not anymore." She turned and walked back inside, and for the first time Garrett realized she wasn't afraid of him, not anymore. The mediation room was nothing like Evelyn had imagined. No towering judge, no rows of jury seats. Just 4 chairs, 1 polished wood table, and silence so tight it could crush lungs. Evelyn sat beside Noah, a steady calm behind her eyes. She wore a navy suit, a modest one, but it looked regal on her, like armor. Across the table sat Garrett, flanked by his lawyer, a man with sleek silver hair and anxious fingers that tapped the tabletop non-stop. Garrett wouldn't look at her, not once. The mediator entered, a neutral figure in a gray suit, greeted everyone professionally and explained the process. But Evelyn barely registered the words. Her heart was beating with rhythm, measured, deliberate, like the low drum of a battle march. Noah began. He slid a heavy binder across the table. "This," he said, "is the complete file of evidence pertaining to Mr. Garrett Parker's misappropriation of the Walter J. Parker Trust, as well as attempted coercion of its beneficiary, Mrs. Evelyn Parker." Garrett scoffed. "This is ridiculous." Noah didn't respond. He simply opened the binder. Page by page, he laid it out. The original trust documents bearing Walter's signature and stipulations, naming Evelyn as sole beneficiary. Financial statements from the trust's inception to the present, highlighting every unauthorized withdrawal Garrett had made over 15 years, amounting to millions. Then came the timeline of purchases. Luxury cars, vacation properties, stocks, all traced back to trust disbursements. Garrett's lawyer leaned forward, murmured something in his client's ear. Noah continued. He played a clean audio clip. Evelyn's voice, soft and confused, asking about old bonds. Then Garrett's voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Don't touch them. You don't know what you're doing. I'll handle it." Then came the photos. Crystal clear images taken by the private investigator. Garrett accepting the envelope, shoving forward a power of attorney form, Evelyn signing under pressure. The binder closed with a soft but final thud. The silence afterward was loud. Garrett's face had drained to the color of wet ash. His lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. "This is entrapment," Garrett said, voice cracking. "This," Noah replied, "is evidence. You walked into her home with the intent to deceive. You have a documented history of financial exploitation and breach of fiduciary duty. The trust fund was created to protect Mrs. Parker's future. You used it to fund your lifestyle." The mediator glanced between the two sides. "What are the terms of restitution?" Noah pulled out a second document. Full repayment of the misappropriated trust funds, including 15 years of compound interest, calculated by our forensic accountant. Liquidation of all assets acquired through trust withdrawals. Additionally, a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing and formal apology to Mrs. Parker, to be filed as part of the settlement and entered into the court record. Garrett stared at the paper as if it might burst into flames. "I won't sign that," he muttered. Noah leaned back. "Then we proceed to trial. And every detail, your betrayal, the $5 cake, the coercion, the greed, will be played out before the public. Not just to a jury, but to the press, to your investors, your employees, your clients." The silence was unbearable. Evelyn didn't flinch. Her eyes never left Garrett's face. He looked up, and for the first time, their gazes met. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was finished. Garrett looked away first. He took the pen from the table, and he signed. One stroke at a time, he admitted his guilt. He agreed to repay every dollar. He relinquished properties, stocks, and assets. And most painfully of all, he signed the written confession, acknowledging that he had betrayed his fiduciary duty and exploited his own mother for personal gain. His hands trembled when he set the pen down. Evelyn stood. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. She simply nodded once, to the mediator, to Noah, and even, faintly, to her son. Then she turned, her heels clicking softly on the floor, and walked out of the room. For the first time in 15 years, she walked tall and free. As Evelyn stepped out into the sunlight, the warmth on her face felt foreign, almost too soft for the weight she had just laid down. Noah caught up beside her, quiet and present, offering his arm. She didn't take it. She walked on her own. At the foot of the courthouse steps, Garrett appeared. He wasn't flanked by his lawyer anymore. Just him, his face raw, his expensive jacket unbuttoned, hair tousled like a man who'd spent the night wrestling ghosts. He called her name once, softly. "Mom." Evelyn stopped, turned. There was a tremble in his voice, a boyish pitch that almost cracked the shell of her resolve. "I'm sorry," he said. "For all of it, I lost my way." She looked at him, not through him, not with rage, but with something colder, something final. "You lost your way," she echoed, her voice low. 15 years, Garrett. You weren't lost. You knew exactly where you were. His mouth opened and closed. "I thought it was just business, that you didn't need. I didn't mean." "Stop," she interrupted, her tone soft but absolute. He tried again, more desperate this time. "I know I can't undo it, but maybe we could talk, just dinner sometime." Or Evelyn took one step closer, and that was worse than yelling, worse than a slap, because her face wasn't angry. It was peaceful. "You don't owe me a dinner. You don't owe me words. You had 15 years to show me I mattered. 15 birthdays, one phone call, a $5 cake." His shoulders dropped. "I'm not angry anymore," she said, almost to herself. You can only burn for so long before you turn to ash, and I refuse to live as a pile of soot." He nodded, like he understood, but he didn't. He never would. She stepped past him, never looking back. The afternoon sun in New Orleans was golden when she arrived home. Her yellow shotgun house stood quietly, vines curling along the porch railings. She opened the door, greeted by the familiar creak of old floorboards, and stepped inside. The air smelled of jasmine and age. She moved to the kitchen without a word, took the $5 cake, still boxed, still untouched, from the fridge. It was more mold than frosting now, a sad chemical bloom of sugar and rot. She placed it carefully on an old tin tray, carried it out to the porch. There, she set it on the wooden railing, lit a single match, and watched. The flames licked up slow at first, like testing their permission. Then they caught fully, consuming the sugary mass in crackles and smoke. The blue and yellow frosting bubbled into grotesque swirls, the red lettering melting into an unrecognizable smear. Evelyn didn't flinch. This wasn't rage. This was a rite. This was the funeral of a version of her that had stayed quiet too long. She stayed there until the last curl of smoke vanished, the tray now blackened and warped. Then she picked it up, walked it to the trash bin, and shut the lid with a soft click. Back inside, she moved to the mantel. There, in a delicate frame, was the photo of her and Walter on their wedding day. Young, bright-eyed, full of tomorrows. "I did it," she whispered. And for the first time in years, she felt like he was listening. She spent the evening sitting on the porch swing, the breeze gentle, the chains squeaking a familiar rhythm. She held a cup of tea, not out of habit, but out of choice. The street was quiet. Garrett was gone. He didn't call again. He didn't write. Whether it was shame or selfishness, she didn't care. His absence no longer hurt. It healed. Because sometimes peace doesn't come from reconciliation. It comes from letting go. And that, Evelyn realized, was the final act of motherhood, releasing the child you raised into the consequences he chose. The sound of hammers and paintbrushes had replaced silence in Evelyn's house. What once groaned under the weight of age now hummed with rebirth. The wood siding, once faded to a tired gray, gleamed in a buttery shade of yellow that soaked in the Louisiana sun like joy returned home. The renovation wasn't extravagant. It was intentional. Every board replaced, every hinge oiled, every window cleared of grime. It was a restoration not just of a structure, but of soul. She hired a contractor from her church. Good man, respectful of the house's bones. Evelyn insisted the porch swing stay. "It's got rhythm," she'd said with a small smile. The man nodded. He knew what she meant. In the front yard, she planted hibiscus and magnolia. The air, already sweet with southern bloom, now carried memory and freshness in equal parts. Then came her boldest move. At 67, Evelyn opened a cafe, not a big one, just 2 repurposed tables on her wide front porch, a chalkboard sign that read Old Notes Cafe, home of sweet tea and soul, and a small speaker that played vinyl jazz records during the day. She renamed it a few weeks later, after the old record James used to play. Old Music Corner. It was her way of making the past sing into the present. Locals came, friends from church, strangers who passed by and were drawn in by the scent of cinnamon coffee cake or the mellow sound of Nina Simone drifting through the ivy. Evelyn didn't serve lattes or cold brews. She served stories, her own, and those of others who needed a place to breathe. One morning, she found a folded note on a napkin. "This porch made me feel seen again, thank you." She framed it and hung it near the front door, but she didn't stop there. Evelyn booked a cruise to Alaska, not a budget deal from the back of a catalog, but a stateroom with a balcony. She stood on that balcony wrapped in a wool coat, coffee in hand, watching blue glaciers crumble into ancient seas. And for the first time in decades, her breath didn't carry fear or disappointment. It carried awe. She met women, widows, grandmothers, former teachers, retired nurses. On deck chairs and over steaming bowls of chowder, they shared lives, once muted by sacrifice. They laughed like girls, cried like sisters, and danced under skies ribboned with stars. Evelyn told her story, not as a victim, as a woman reborn. And they listened, not with pity, but with reverence. In those late-night conversations, she discovered that betrayal, though dressed differently, had visited many of them, but so had resilience and hope and fierce, unrelenting dignity. By the time the cruise docked back in Seattle, Evelyn had gained more than photos. She had gained a tribe. Back home, her mornings were full. She'd rise with the sun, brew dark roast coffee in the old French press, and open the porch cafe. On the speaker, Ray Charles crooned. On the table, a journal waited, where she wrote down quotes from her guests, memories, even new dreams. The yellow house had come alive again, so had Evelyn. She wasn't trying to reclaim her youth. She was claiming her present, and it bloomed brighter than she'd ever imagined. From a small corner cafe grew a movement Evelyn never expected. It began with one woman. She was about Evelyn's age, hair pulled tight, voice shaky. She had read about the case, Evelyn versus her own son. It had made the rounds, not in newspapers, but whispered on porches, shared in hushed phone calls, messaged quietly on Facebook. "My daughter won't speak to me," the woman said, stirring her tea with trembling fingers. She said, "I'm too much trouble. She left me at a senior home and moved to another state." Evelyn listened, and when the woman finished, Evelyn reached across the table and took her hand. "I know that silence," she said softly, "but I also know this. You are not forgotten. You are still needed." The next week, there were 3 more women. By the end of the month, the cafe porch couldn't hold them all, so Evelyn started something official. The Evelyn Project, a support group, a legal resource, a listening ear. She partnered with Noah, who offered free consultations every Tuesday for any elderly woman navigating legal betrayal. The church let them use the fellowship hall. Donations came from neighbors, anonymous envelopes left on the porch steps. They didn't call it a charity. They called it a stand. Women came from parishes near and far. Some brought paperwork. Some brought nothing but broken hearts, all left with something they hadn't carried in a long time: validation. And Evelyn? She found purpose where grief had once bloomed. One Thursday morning, as golden light filtered through the garden, Evelyn spotted a figure at her gate. A woman, thin, worn, clutching her purse like armor. "May I?" she asked. Evelyn nodded. "Always." They sat on the porch. Evelyn poured tea. The woman hesitated. "My name is Marianne," she began. "I used to live in Sarasota, Florida." Evelyn's hand froze mid-pour. "I'm Whitney's mother." The name cracked the air, but Evelyn didn't flinch. She simply placed the teapot down and folded her hands. "I didn't know," Marianne said, eyes filling. "I didn't know the whole truth. Whitney said you were declining. She said Garrett was struggling to care for you and that they were saving you from yourself." She swallowed. "I let them put the house in my name. I didn't ask questions. I let it happen." Her voice broke. "And when I saw the article about the trust fund, the cake, your story, I knew. I enabled it." Evelyn's face didn't harden. It softened. She reached for Marianne's hand, the same way she had done for so many others. "I forgive you," she said, her voice steady. "Why?" Marianne whispered. "I don't deserve it." "Because forgiveness," Evelyn said, "isn't about what you deserve. It's about what I refuse to carry." They sat in silence. 2 mothers, 2 lives intersected by betrayal, 2 women choosing peace. That evening, Evelyn sat alone on her porch. The air was thick with jasmine. The lights from Goknyak Zua cast a warm glow on the whitewashed railing. Her journal rested on her lap, open to a fresh page. She picked up her pen, no hesitation, no tremble, and she wrote, "I lived, and I rose again." The wind caught the edge of the page, lifting it slightly, as if even the night wanted to read her words. The yellow house behind her wasn't just a home, it was a lighthouse. And Evelyn, she wasn't just a survivor, she was a beacon.